Our goal is to talk about Canada, all the 80 plus immigration programs in Canada, the economic programs primarily. So Canada today is I think one of the largest volume of immigrants. Canada takes in 1% of immigrants every year. Which means that we're growing our population by 1%. I think is the largest amount of immigrant population anywhere as a percentage of the overall population. So this year our target is to do 411,000 permanent residencies. So we're going to talk about why Canada makes sense, why it should be part of everybody's strategy, and what are your pathways, what are various programs available, and and if we have time, we'll dive a little bit into the startup visa program to understand how complex that program is, who is this a right fit for, who's this not a right fit for. So I'll start off by just introducing the panel. So my name's Ajay Malhotra. I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. And I'm the founder for Canada Startup Company. Along with me is Megan Tuck. She's a senior partner at Canada Startup Company. Megan, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon now. As Ajay said, my name is Megan. I'm a senior partner at Canada Startup Company. Unlike a statistic that Ajay will share in a bit, I am 4 generations born in Canada, so I don't fall quite in the first generation immigrant population that we see. So I've got a lot of experience with the education system, the healthcare system that we'll talk about today as well. I can hand it back over.
I'm actually excited about today's panel because I have spent more of my life outside India than India. I was born in India. And so I had tons of experience trying to immigrate to Malaysia and then Singapore and then United States and then Canada. And along with me are 2 very recent immigrants. So Alban, Jerome is from Bangalore, but now you're a permanent resident in Canada.
Yes, I've been here in Canada for like about 2 years at this point. I think it's a very exciting country to come to, right? And from it's open to people, the process is straightforward. There's no gray area, complications, nothing about it.
Absolutely. That's one of the good things about Canadian immigration system. I mean, I listened to Chamath Palihapiti. I don't know if, a lot of you listen to him. He's the founder of Social Capital. And his family also immigrated from Sri Lanka to Canada. We know that Elon Musk's family also immigrated to Canada first. And then they went over to United States. So, and all of them talk about the fact how Canadian immigration system's straightforward, streamlined, and tons of options for everybody. Now, Shaurya, you work with Castlemore Law, and you're a recent immigrant to Canada. Would you like to talk a little bit about yourselves?
Yep. Hi, so I'm Shaurya, and I'm a lawyer, and we work closely with the Canada Startup Company, and we deal with all the 80 plus immigration, economic immigration programs that are there in Canada, and yeah, like Alban said, it's in terms of there are no gray areas as such. It's fairly black and white, and the processes, there's the judicial processes behind everything are fairly straightforward, and it's fairly like there's no middle path. It's either you qualify for it or you don't qualify for it, which is what we aim to cut down on. I mean, it's not that you qualify, you either do or you don't.
Or you don't, yeah. So we'll touch a little bit on why Canada and why Canada should be a part of your immigration strategy or your client's immigration strategies. And then from there on, we'll touch on the different programs and we'll, then open up to you for question and answers as well, right? So you can ask your specific questions at that point. So we've introduced the presenters. Now, Shaurya is a lawyer. I'm an RCIC. Megan and Alban have, experience in psychology and criminology. Now, we usually like to talk about countries in terms of the top reasons to go to that country, right? So if you're an immigrant, I think one of the top reasons for Canada is a large economy, right? It's a large country, tons of options available. You could be doing farming, you could be doing hospitality, you could be doing, you could be studying, you could be doing anything, and it's a very, very large mainstream economy. We're the 8th largest GDP in the world, and this is the GDP distribution by different provinces. Obviously, Ontario as a province does very, very, very well. And a large majority of immigrants also come and settle in Ontario. So that's one other thing. I think it's a pretty much immigrant-driven economy.
Well, Ajay, I was going to say something else here. Your map doesn't quite reflect it, but let's talk about Alberta a little bit as well, right? It's a booming province when it comes to landing immigrants. Real estate investments are really awesome in that province. We're seeing a huge push. It's beautiful. That's where you see the beautiful blue lake in the picture, right?
Absolutely. We'll get to Alberta. I actually have another screen where we talk about where immigrants come and land. So the major cities that they land in. Right. Number two, I think Canada is the fourth safest country in this world. I think it's very important. I know that firsthand, right? I was in the United States for a long while, and the thing that I always thought about was that I don't want to raise my kids for 12 to 14 years and then realize that I just lost my kid because they were in a school shooting. So, from that perspective, I decided that Canada was the right country for me to be in, right? I'm in a major developed economy. I have access to the North American markets. It's an English-speaking country, so it's very natural for me to be there, as well as it's very, very safe. I'm not running the risks that you're running in United States for that matter, right? Constantly gets into surveys as one of the best countries to be in. Now, the other advantage of Canada is universal healthcare system, right? So I've had 2 kids in Canada, and I can tell you that I paid for parking, and that's all I paid, right? So, the first kid was $54, I believe, in parking, and I hate to evaluate them like that. But there's a universal healthcare system. It's actually very good. It's provincially regulated, so whichever province you're in, that province's insurance takes care of your healthcare, and then when you travel outside, you're covered for 14 days. When you travel within the country, the province covers each other's billings. So it's a really nice system. Now, nothing's perfect, so sometimes we talk about, and you would hear stuff about waits in this system. Sometimes the system gets overloaded, but we're trying to make it better and better. Okay. Number 4, this is something that why don't we talk about your experiences, because you just landed as new immigrants in this particular country. What do you think about Canadians in terms of acceptance of society for you?
Like, you can see the smile on my face. They're the best people ever. I mean, just from something as simple as, I've had this habit in me now as well, where something as simple as any door I walk through, I'll open the door for the 10 next people coming in. Everyone wishes you good morning. It's just people are so nice, so welcoming, and it's like, I believe Canadians are the happiest people in the world. How can anyone be so happy all the time, guys? Just brilliant people.
And not everybody is even on drugs.
Oh yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the door. You become a Canadian already, Shaurya, at this rate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that was a big point for me was that I'd spent 9 years in the United States, and and not critical. I mean, it's a great economy. It gave me a good amount of options. It gave me a lot of opportunities, but everybody still called my name as AJ. It was easier for them to pronounce it that way. They pronounced my first name as AJ. Very few, if any, took the initiative of really pronouncing it as Ajay. Now, the first time I came to Canada and I was going to get my driver's license, the lady standing there said, "Hello, Mr. Malhotra, how are you?" And I'm like, that's a shock to my system, right? Just south of the border, 50 kilometers from here, they can't pronounce my first name properly. And all of a sudden, the moment I cross the borderline up north, the acceptance, the humility just increases so much that you take the effort of even pronouncing my complicated last name very well, right?
I think, Ajay, from my perspective, having been born and raised in Canada, being in a multicultural environment, it's normal to ask, right? Like if I didn't know how to say Malhotra, for example, I would say, "Is it Malhotra?" And I would ask for the clarification. So being exposed to different cultures, different religions is something that I always grew up around, right? I didn't find it strange that I'm sitting here with 3 immigrants from India here today, right? It's not uncommon.
I noticed that about Canadians, right? There's this big joke also where they say a Canadian walked into a bar in Texas and just apologized about something, and the Texan goes like, "Oh, you damn Canadians, you apologize too much." And the guy goes like, "Oh, sir, I'm sorry for doing that too." So, right? So they're just very accepting, very humble people, right? And I think that makes a huge difference because when you get into that country, it becomes home. It becomes something that you find the society accepts you for. Right? Now, economically, it's a beautiful place to be in economically, and we'll touch on that. Now, you were talking about Alberta, so we're here on to Alberta. This is the key places that we find immigrants come in and settle in. So the size of the bubble tells you how many people are getting there. If you're in the business of immigration, take a picture of this because this will give you an idea of where your clients would usually like to go and settle. The biggest bubble is obviously Toronto. 117,770 immigrants come there every year on an average. The second largest bubble is Vancouver. Third largest is Montreal, immediately followed by Calgary, then Edmonton, then Winnipeg. Now, most people outside of Canada don't know of these cities as well, but you touched on Alberta. Do you want to talk a little bit more about Alberta?
Yeah, I think before we talk about Alberta, I'll talk about Toronto and what Alberta is doing to Toronto. So Toronto is a really well-known city as far as I'm aware to people around the world. It's one of the biggest, other than Vancouver, places for immigrants to look at and say, CN Tower, I'm going to go there, or mountains, I'll go to Vancouver. But Calgary specifically has been, really pushing towards economic advancement, really pushing their beautiful environment. Like I said, that's where Lake Louise is, the beautiful blue lake, the beautiful mountains, and they've really been pushing, their cheap real estate, no foreign buyers tax on real estate as well, and really been pushing newcomers to come and settle, there's lots of jobs available, lots of investment opportunities, and they're actually now putting out ads in Toronto saying, not that great things about Toronto to get people to come land in Calgary. So
Yeah, usually about the traffic though.
usually about the traffic, yes.
It's also very, very, very beautiful. So Lake Louise is in the Rocky Mountains, an area called Banff. I personally have traveled quite a lot extensively in Europe and Southeast Asia, and I still feel that Banff is perhaps the most beautiful place on earth. So definitely a must-go, must-see kind of a place. It should come back soon. Now, number 6 point about Canada is education for your family. It's highly ranked in terms of education rankings. Now, we know United States has some of the best universities in the world, especially with MIT, Stanford, and stuff like that. But Canada ranks number 4. A lot of people in the tech industry have heard of University of Waterloo. In fact, Y Combinator, which is the biggest incubator in the world, says that if they ever open a second division, that'll be next to University of Waterloo. So that tells you a lot about the universities in Canada.
Ajay, I think I want to touch upon something because I talk to a lot of clients and a lot of partners around the world, but about Canada's education system. It's really uniform across the board compared to what we see in a lot of countries and even the US when it comes to colleges and universities, right? I always get asked, where should my kids go to school? And I said, really, anywhere in Canada is actually a really nice place, whether it's a private school or a public school or a college or university. They're uniformly, funded and taken care of.
Yeah, there are a lot of great universities, and then you decide the university based on the program that you're taking, right? So if you're taking biotech, you try for something like University of Guelph. You're taking computer science, you try for University of Waterloo. You're going artificial intelligence, there are 3-4 good universities you can go to. Hey. Number 7 point, I'll touch on this quickly. We've touched on this before. Every 5th person in Canada is a first-generation immigrant. So for immigrants, it's very nice. It feels like home, right? You find people who are in the same life period as you are in. Where do Canada's immigrants come from? Overwhelming majority of them come from India. And then after that, China, Philippines, Nigeria. You did talk about Lake Louise, so here's a picture from there. And so, one of the most beautiful places on earth. An innovation-driven economy, so Canada is very quickly transitioning its economy from services to innovation now. So it tries to lead it ahead, and that makes it a very good place for anybody new, right, who wants to build a family and a life there. Uh, I said 10, but I lied. We'll have 2 extra bonus reasons. Some of them would be kosher, some of them would be non-kosher, like this one. Global warming is another reason where Canada would actually benefit from climate change. And lastly, there are a lot of very, very rich immigrants who've come to Canada, and as a first generation, they made themselves into billionaires, which usually does not happen in any other country. So this country does give you the capability of really making it very, very big.
Yeah, and Ajay, I think we should even talk about the amount of support that the government even puts forth on all levels, right? So social services to business grants, media grants, it's endless. It's millions and millions of dollars a year.
Billions, Megan.
Yeah, billions, and billions of dollars a year that gives people kind of that step forward and that opportunity.
Absolutely. Now, what we want to do is, everybody looks at Canada and says, there are a lot of programs, which program do I fit in, right? So we try to summarize that into a slide right here. And we basically said 2 things, right? The first thing that you look for in your client or your own program is whether your CRS score is below 504, which is the cutoff today, or it's higher than 504. If it's higher than 504, don't look anywhere else. Just go into the express entry pool, right? Now, usually people who are CLB, which is Canadian Language Benchmark, level 9 plus, and they have decent education and some amount of work experience, 3 to 4 years of work experience, they should get beyond 504. Right? But the moment you start crossing 34, 35 years of age, very difficult to get beyond that because you get lesser points for age-based qualification. Now, that program works like clockwork. So it takes just 6 months to get your permanent residency. Sometimes because of a pandemic, it was a little bit retrogressed, but right now it's coming back on track. So there's a draw every month that you should get your permanent residency in as soon as 6 months there. Now, if you and your clients do not get to 504, then these are the 5 different options that you should look through, right? Option number 1, if the client has 1.2 million lying around, and they can safely invest it in a Government of Quebec program for 5 years with 0 interest on it. So they have to literally park that money, leave it alone for 5 years, and they don't get any interest on it. Then there's a Quebec Investor Program. Number 2 option is startup visa program. They can either have a startup of their own, bring it to Canada, or they can invest in other startups in very early stages and become founders of that startup as part of that process. So that investment has to go early stage, that investment has to go almost at a founder level. Number 3, provincial nomination programs. About 11 programs are out of the 88 are federal programs. The rest 77 are provincial programs. So what Canadian government did was also as a part of saying, we're going to spread the immigrants, we're going to spread the wealth. They said every province and every region can come up with their own program. And as long as the federal government's able to certify it, you can get acceptance through that particular route as well. Shaurya, would you want to talk something about the provincial nomination programs with your experience?
So it's fairly, like, every province basically decides on the basis of what sort of workers or what sort of immigrants do they need. Like me and you, we were just discussing last week about how Alberta, Manitoba and Saskatchewan now have come up with some really nice farm programs. I mean, so they're in need of farmers. The farming economy in Canada is substantially, because young people do not really want to go into farming. And then there are like immigrant farmers who are actually immigrating to these 3 provinces because those provinces are actually in need of farmers. So there are distinct streams right from farmers to, there are specific streams for occupations like physiotherapists and all of that across all streams. So it's basically on on the needs of every province, that it keeps on changing, and the provinces formulate their needs as per their requirements.
Absolutely. And if you work with somebody who keeps themselves up to speed on these programs, then your clients are able to find just the perfect program that fits them, right? So if it's a junior farmer, it's probably a Saskatchewan program.
That's-
If it's a farmer who wants a dairy, they may probably need to go to Alberta, because there you will get the licensing for dairy. So you have to look at all of that and then find just the perfect program for your client. Now, once you find that perfect program, they sail through pretty fast too. The provincial nominations on your farming programs are 6 to 7 months.
Oh, even lesser than that sometimes. But it's
Even-
only the business ideation that takes time. Otherwise, the processing times are sailing through right now. They're close to about 2 to 3 months, because farming as
And your
it-
clients get a direct permanent residency,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
So no more of work visa this or work visa that. You can actually get a direct permanent residency, but you do have to do the investment. But your investment's very secure. It's in land. It's in agricultural land, right?
and
It can't get any more
it's-
safer than
if
that.
it's a farmer, I mean, farmers are pretty smart. Someone who's been doing it for their entire life, they know what sort of land they're investing on. Plus, the concept of exploratory visits, where they actually take a look at the sort of land and the sort of microclimate that exists there, because the climate is still everything that's available online. But a farmer knows that what sort of microclimate is specific to that particular region, because
Crop
the
and the
farms
kind of
are 300, 400, 500 acres. So it could be that one part of the farm receives more rain and the other part of the farm receives less rain. So it's variable, and it's so I mean it would be obvious that, I mean, a person who's in the know and regularly updating themselves, only those people can sort of help you through these programs.
And then, so the next program is the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, TFWs. And Canada has a huge skills and labor shortage at this point. So you can get a lot of your clients and you can come into Canada as a temporary foreign worker. And that's also very, very viable program to get to Canada. Then we have pilot programs: Atlantic Immigration Pilot, Northern Immigration Pilot, and AgriFull. So, anybody who's involved in the process knows all the new programs. The Atlantic one's been converted to a full program now. It's no longer a pilot, it's now a full program. Now, you have all of these programs available in Canada, but you still have to make sure that your paperwork's done 100% correct and there's no issues with the paperwork. Now, what happens, Shaurya, if your paperwork's incorrect? What is Section 40? Do you want to talk to us about that?
Yep, I mean, Section 40 is straight up misrepresentation, right? There's not just a rejection on your file, but you're barred from filing another immigration application for the next 5 years, which is, I mean, not just that. There's so many other factors, like there are inadmissibility grounds, and there's
Absolutely.
so much more than that. I mean, like there are grounds of inadmissibility on criminality. There might be health reasons for your inadmissibility, and there are other reasons specific to every other program as well. I mean, some programs need to show significant benefit, so you need to know how to take out the significant benefit in your client. You need to show how your client is going to bring significant
Now,
benefit to
one
Canada.
of the
and so many-
drawbacks, as you were mentioning, one of the drawbacks of the Canadian program, which we'll be honest about, is the fact that the officers have very little discretion in their hands. They have a very regimented process they have to go through. So if your filing is incorrect, right? I had a client where this client had filed a visitor visa before, and in his visitor visa, he wrote that he was the president of the company. And then after a while, he did a work permit filing, and he wrote that he was the CEO of the company. They're very close to each other in terms of titles, but the only discretion that the officer had was that if I count this as something wrong, then I have to bar you for 5 years from entering Canada because it's considered Section 40 misrepresentation. There was no other option for the officer. The only other option he had, which he took, was to issue a process fairness letter. So the PFL, as we call it, comes over to us, and then we have to explain that, this was a genuine mistake and this is what happened, and then they can take that into consideration. So in this case, thankfully, it was positive. They took that into consideration. They issued a process fairness letter, and the person's now in Canada on a work permit. But that's one of the challenges that you face while doing immigration to Canada. You have to be precise, right? And that's very important. So, and for those purposes, we started Canada Startup Company, where the goal was it's your new start in Canada, and we'll help you through that particular new start. So we handhold all our clients. We set up a very, very precise mechanism for moving them through this. So as you can see, this is on my screen, some of the various stages and steps we take on some very complex applications. So this is example of the startup visa work permit application package. And as you can see, it moves through multiple steps. Every step, the documentation is kept very, very clean. Quite a few different packages get into making of a startup visa file. And those are important. It's important that the process be done to near perfection because it gets evaluated with near perfection. Right? But it does help get good results. How do you feel when your clients finally land and they're happy and they talk about it?
The first word I can think of is relieved. The second one that I can think of is really rewarding, right? It's a lot of work, and for everyone that is here today, most people in the UAE aren't here forever, right? So everyone knows what it's like to fill out the paperwork and fill it out again and fill it out again, and you got to be absolutely correct every time, right? So it's a lot of work. It is a huge process, but it's doable, and we have the folder structure, the checklist of the checklists to make sure that things are done professionally, things are done correctly, so that we do get the results.
And at Canada Startup Company, because we focus on every single client and the objective for that single client, that our rejection rate's very, very minimal on something as very complicated. Startup visa process, I believe, is the most complicated of the processes anywhere in the world. Now, Alban, you run a significant part of the startup visa process.
Yes, Ajay.
Do you want to talk a little bit about it and talk a little bit about how you're able to get your failure rate to an absolute minimum? So Alban's failure rate on that particular process is 1.1%. And that entire failure rate is only because of a few things that we'll walk you through. But half of that failure rate is because the clients are not able to get their proof of funds justifiable and correct. So that failure rate is entirely over
True.
to... Go
That
ahead,
is so
please.
true. A lot of times it's the paperwork. That's the thing. Our stacks are usually about 600 to 900 pages per applicant on this program. So we actually start from the basic. We talk to our clients. We do a lot of conversations with them. Their profiles are written and rewritten in the best way possible. Some of these guys here right in the UAE, the clients we've had, they've got like 20, 30 years experience in their field. And they never really talk about it, right? In our culture, we don't really like to boast about the successes that we do. So we actually help them put the profile here properly. Then we work with the startups that they're working on. We polish them, help them bring them to the Canadian language. Essentially, it's a lot of rewrites and reworks, working with the clients to make sure that every paper, every document that goes into it is reviewed multiple times so that there is not even like a single I that's not dotted or a T that's not done. And this involves multiple meetings, multiple conversations. We handhold them from day one till the LOS is issued. And sometimes even when they land here, we are here to make sure they're taken care of.
Yeah, and Alban, to add to that, I'm someone that works with our B2B partners, and a lot of the time, one of the first touch points of the client directly, right? And I want to touch upon what you said, Ajay, the proof of funds. So I say you can't build something great on a weak foundation, right?
That is so true.
It would be like building a house in a sinkhole. It's gonna sink, right? You cannot build an immigration application or a file on, not knowing something, right? So
that is so true, right? Like sometimes name consistencies happen, clerical errors happen, and you got to make sure every document is matched with each other to make even the way the names are spelled, the order of the names, all of that stuff.
Absolutely. And as part of this ecosystem, right, we go out and we talk quite a lot. So some of you would find us in multiple conferences. You'll also find us at the National Citizenship and Immigration Conference. It's usually attended by hundreds and hundreds of licensed providers. And this is me and Megan giving a talk about how to run complex business immigration programs at the National Citizenship and Immigration Conference. So we're very actively involved in the ecosystem, trying to give back on how we've achieved that success and how everybody should achieve that success, and they should at least aspire to get as perfect on immigration filings as possible. We always believe that a file is not a file, there's a life on the other side of it. So we have to treat a file like a life, not like a file. These are some of the strategic partnerships that we have in place in Canada. So we work with University of Waterloo, we work with Tacenda Capital, KPMG Law. Mars is Canada's largest incubator. It's actually the world's largest urban incubator. So about 4,000 companies at any point are incubated there. So if you're bringing in founders who are more entrepreneurial in nature, we can expose them to the ecosystem. We can connect them to the right people in the ecosystem. Right. 40 plus professionals in our team to help serve your clients. This is some pictures of our offices, and Alban with a half-eaten apple in his hand. And
It's a fast-paced office.
it's a fast-paced office. The culture is about working hard and playing harder, and and that's about it from us. This is the contact information. So if you're an existing client or looking for support on clients, then it's support@canstartco.com. Sales, you can reach us at info@canstartco.com. And and if there are any questions at this point, we're open to your questions.
I was going to say there might be some questions, and I always like the question and answer period. Yeah.
If there are no questions, Megan, I'll like to ask something that I think we usually hear from the audience in terms of processing timelines, right? So I'll give it as an open kind of question. What are the processing timelines, and how do you think they compare with any other major country, right? I'm not talking about a small country which has the ability to process things really, really fast. I'm talking about a major country like United States or UK. Like, how would it compare against them? Large countries have obligations to look through the global case management system. They have to validate things. I'm open to any one of you who
Sure,
wants to take.
I'll go ahead, and I'll probably split between Sharia and I. So first of all, if we're going to compare it amongst other really large countries, you said US, Canada's processing power is extremely powerful. We found out alone at the Canadian Embassy the other day that in Abu Dhabi alone, there's 70 people processing visa applications when over 100,000 applications are reviewed in Abu Dhabi alone for Canada. So the processing times, due to COVID have, kind of built up beyond what they were, but we're seeing significant reductions in these processing times now at this time. About 6 months ago, we were seeing for the work permit about 6 to 9 months on average, and I would say now we're seeing about anywhere between 8 days and 2.5 months, just as an example.
So pointing to 8 days, Shaurya, your team recently got an approval on a work permit in 8 days on startup visa?
Yep. I mean, I was as shocked as anyone, but yeah, but I think it mostly depends on what the need is of the hour, right? I mean, Canada right now needs immigrants, needs people on work permit, needs immigrants to immigrate. So that's why now we're seeing that the visitor visas, as such, the temporary residence visas, like the visitor visas or the tourist visas, might be getting slowed down to some extent, but the work permits and the permanent resident applications are
Moving
speeding
very
up right
fast.
now. Yes. So I mean, now would be the ideal time to apply for any immigration program to Canada, because Canada does need immigrants right now. The economy is, they're trying to get the economy back on track, trying to battle recession, trying to get the economy back on track, which is why the next 1 to 2 years are really crucial for the immigration industry. And I mean, we hope to see less and less processing times. And just to add on to your thing, Megan, I think we spoke to the officer at the embassy the other day, and they said they have the highest, the largest team that processes visas in Abu Dhabi. And I mean, 70-member team outside Canada. That was just like amazing to listen to.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, we've taken all these steps as a country. We've increased the amount of processing staff by 1,250. So there are 1,250 new officers processing applications. A full new system put into place. So the Canadian government spent close to $500 million putting an entirely new online system with attached quote-unquote artificial intelligence. We don't like to talk about that a lot, but that helps speed up processing of applications really, really fast. And and the commitment from the government is to bring down processing times to pre-COVID levels and even faster than that. So great opportunity. I think I'm losing screen, but that was the last screen that we were on. Any other questions? We're open to your questions. Otherwise, we thank you all for being here and listening to us about Canada.
Ajay, I got one thing that I think
Go
we
ahead.
should address, a question that I get all the time, and it's, there's never one primary applicant. Like sometimes, yes, but there's usually primary applicant, a spouse, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children and beyond that we've seen, right? So, let's talk about the family benefits that Canadian immigration, especially the startup visa program, can actually award, you at various steps of the process. So, Ajay, do you want me to take that ahead? Do you want to go ahead?
In terms of what benefits
Yeah,
kids get? Yeah.
take it away, Alban.
Sure. So I think biggest benefit a lot of people don't realize is how good the education system is, and it's actually free from kindergarten to 12th, right? And then there is whole support systems there that are built into it. One of the interesting things that I actually realized when I came to Canada is the amount of support that the Canadian government provides for families, whether it's after-school programs or preschool programs, to make sure that parents are able to work and still kids have attention. There is so many avenues for them to be enriched in their lives. I remember, Megan, you talking about some of the programs that you went through as a kid that I don't think we even heard about in India. Like the level of thought
the
process.
government does that very truly. One of the things that surprised me quite a lot is that they even test your kid a couple of times. Once I believe in grade 5th, and once I believe a little bit further after that. And they find that if your kid's exceptional, then they move them to a school which is for gifted children. So not just that you don't have to worry about the kindergarten to 12th admission, you don't have to fight for admissions. The admission is automatic, the program is free of education, for education, but exactly. Also that if your kid is actually better and gifted, they have the ability to go there. And then, from a gifted perspective, they're checking both in terms of management and technology. So there are sci-tech schools focused on science and technology, and there are international baccalaureate or IB schools, which are focused on everything else.
And if I could also add as well, because I get this a lot from clients, if you have children with disabilities, including ADHD or autism, there's also specialized programs that, test these kind of students, provide them, technology, if it's a laptop or software that's needed as well for learning, then that's provided as well by the government free of charge to help them.
It's pretty comprehensive that way, right? It's no longer about just the medium. And you talked about how important education is and how easy it is to get admission. A friend of mine moved in January here, and his kid was in school by first week of February. This is like mid of the year admission. Most places you don't even get that option. They're like, wait till the year ends, and then they're like, no, you come here, we'll get you in.
You get hundreds of people coming to Canada talking to Alban because Alban is handling that part of the operation. And most people have this fear, hey, listen, I'm going to move to Canada. Will my kid get admission in a school or not? Especially if you're coming from UAE, you know that you've always struggled for school admissions here. And they're very relieved to find that in Canada, the responsibility of your kid's education is not on you. It's on the government. It's on the state that
Exactly.
they have to find a place for your kid.
I think that's a lot of... I remember, I think you pointed out, right, a lot of clients talk to me. I think often the question is, when does the school year start? Which is the best school should I do? And I said, listen, don't worry about all of that.
Starts when you're ready.
Exactly. It starts the week after you land here. And they didn't understand what it meant till I pointed out how it's easy for them to get admission. And today it's to the point where once you get your applications in, before you land, you can reach out to the neighborhood where you're going to land into, to the local school principal, and then make sure your paperwork is done. And that 1 week is just for you to pick the classes and get acclimated to the process.
So, Shaurya, given you both are fairly new immigrants to this country, we've talked about the positives of the country. What do you think would be the strongest negative of the country?
The weather during the winter, maybe, but I think that's.
I disagree
You
on
haven't
that.
experienced winter yet.
Yeah, so that's what I'm already dreading. No.
No, it's fun, I trust you.
Yeah, it should be fine. I mean, other than that, it's for now at least personally, it's all been really positive. It's just, or maybe like you guys would know from office, it's the food. Like, I mean, I don't cook usually, so I miss home cooked food. But these guys have been. Other than that, I really have only nice things to say. It's been a really nice experience for me, at least personally. It's been.
Well, sure, and maybe both of you guys should share your experience with how we were able to support, finding a house and how we do that for clients as well.
Oh yeah, so we've actually got a very comprehensive post-landing support system as well, where I think I've seen Megan personally help so many clients find the right school for their kids, the sort of courses their kids want to take, and where they can go. Megan does all her research, and then we had a client recently whose both her kids had been accepted into UBC, and she was actually coming over on a work permit, and her PR had to be applied. So Megan actually reached out to UBC and spoke to them, and we realized later that anyone on a closed work permit had domestic tuition. So we ended up saving her about close to $250,000, maybe something more, and she was just so relieved because both her kids were going to UBC.
Yeah,
and
that's one of the things that I think it's something tricky that you should all know about the Canadian education system. That if you are a Canadian permanent resident, you do get the option of paying domestic tuition fees. But there's another caveat. If you're in a restricted work permit, if you're an employer-specific work permit, a lot of universities will still offer you the domestic tuition fees if you ask for it.
And just to sort of give you an example, I was just doing some research about last week, I think. So my sister's a doctor personally, and she wanted to join University of Toronto for her med school, and we were just doing a comparison. It's $125,000 a year for a foreign student, and it's close to about $18,000 a year for a domestic student. So just to sort of give you a comparison on a year-on-year cost, there's about $100,000 difference there. So
absolutely, I see the same in University of Waterloo. So I have a cousin who wants to come here for a computer science degree, and so University of Waterloo would charge him $65,000 a year if he comes in as an international student for a 5-year program. And then his domestic, if he comes as a domestic student, it's $14,000 only. So significant difference in terms of the program fees when you're domestic versus you're international. So even if some of the parents have to invest a little bit to get their permanent residency out of the way earlier, it probably pays back multiple fold because they get all the privileges of being in that country, plus they get cheaper education for their kids. Okay. Well, thank you all once again for being here and attending this. If there are any questions, we're open to questions at this time. Wonderful. With no questions, I think thank you once again. We look forward to Canada being an ideal destination for you and your family members and your clients. So, if you have anything that comes to your mind, please come over. Canada Startup Company has a stall here, and we're all available for individualized consultations. We usually charge for consultations, but as part of this event, we're giving them all for free. So you get consultations from licensed people, and you get them free. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.